Afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. I hope everyone's doing well, had a good start to the week. Thanks very much for joining us for this meeting of Strategy and Resources Committee, and thanks especially to our guests who have joined us. The meeting is open to the public. There's no items that contain any exempt information. The meeting's being webcast as per usual. And we've received one remit question, a question about the remit of this committee, one agenda question, and details have been circulated and we'll come to them at item 5. If I could just ask everyone to switch their phones off, if that's all right. There's no fire test planned. If the fire alarm sounds, please follow Town Hall staff. And I will just begin by asking members of the committee and then the senior officers who are here to introduce themselves so that everyone knows who is joining us today. So my name is Tom Hunt. I'm the leader of the council and chair of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee.
Councillor Angela Argentio, member for Broomhill and Sharrow Vale and chair of Adult Health and Social Care Policy Committee.
And Douglas Johnson, chair of Housing.
Good afternoon. Abdul Qayyum, councillor for Firth Park and co-chair of the Licensing Subcommittee.
Good afternoon, Councillor Dondale for Shire Green and Brightside and Chair of Education, Children and Families Policy Committee.
Good afternoon, from Belbin, Councillor for Firth Park Ward and Deputy Chair of this committee.
Hi there, my name is Ben Miskell. I am Chair of the Transport Regen and Climate Policy Committee and an elected councillor for Park and Arbourthorne Ward.
Hello, Councillor Joe Otten, member for Durham Totley Ward and chair of Environmental Services and Regulation.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Curtis Crossthorne. I am local councillor for Bayton Ward and chair of the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee.
Good afternoon, Martin Smith. I'm councillor for Durham Totley.
Good afternoon, Mohammed Maroof, Graves Park Ward and chair of Economic Development, Skills and Culture Policy Committee.
Good afternoon, my name is Diane Hurst. I'm a member for Richmond Ward.
Thank you very much, and I'll ask the officers to introduce themselves as well. Again, starting on the left-hand side, if that's okay.
Mike Jackson, Chief Operating Officer.
Meredith Teasdale, Strategic Director, Children's.
Kate Josephs, Chief Executive Officer.
David Hollis, General Counsel. Craig Rogerson, Democratic Services.
Greg Fell, Director of Public Health. Good afternoon, Ajman Ali, Executive Director of Neighbourhood Services.
Jonathan Clifton, Director of Strategy and Communications.
Matt Bownshire, Director of Adult Social Care and Wellbeing.
Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. We've got apologies from Councillor Zahira Naz, who's Chair of the Finance and Performance Policy Committee. And before we go any further on the agenda, I just wanted to extend my good wishes and the committee's good wishes to everyone in our communities who's celebrating over the last week and observing what is a holy month for many of our communities. This is a time of faith and of coming together with friends, with neighbours and in our communities. And so to everyone celebrating Lunar New Year over the last week, I wish you good health and luck for the year ahead. And it was wonderful to see so many people out in the city centre over the weekend celebrating Lunar New Year. Thank you to Jerry Chung and the Cultural Inclusive CIC team, along with the council staff who've been supporting for making that event bigger and better every single year. To everybody observing Lent, I wish you a peaceful and reflective season, and to everyone observing Ramadan in the city, I wish you and your families a peaceful and blessed month. As families come together, may this holy month bring peace and reflection and a spirit of compassion. There are members in the council who are observing fast, and so if we can, we'll try to make sure we finish in good time so that people can break their fast, ideally at home with friends and with neighbours. So, item number 2 is exclusion of public and press. There's no items that contain any exempt information, so no need to do that today. Item number 3 is declarations of interest, which is a standard item as usual. So I just need to ask whether any members wish to declare an interest in any of items of business on the agenda. Nope. And then additionally, and because we are considering the budget today, members are asked if they need to declare an inability to vote on any recommendation, resolution or other decision which might affect the council tax calculation, i.e. Where there's an amount that may be payable on a council tax account that they're solely or jointly liable for. Are there any members who need to declare anything relating to council tax? No. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Item number 4 is minutes of the previous meeting, which took place on the 21st of January last month. Are members happy to approve them as a correct record of our meeting? Okay, thank you very much. Item number 5 is public questions, petitions and statements. We've received 2 questions from members of the public. A response to a question about the committee's remit, which was relating to the local plan, has been sent to the member of the public who asked that question, and it's been published on the council's website and circulated already. There was no supplementary question for this meeting received relating to that. There was a question from Clara Chung, who has not able to be here today, but she's asked that her agenda question be read out on her behalf. And I'll invite Craig to read the question, and then I'll give a summary of the response.
Thank you, Chair. The question received from Clara is as follows. January reports reveal the detention of church leaders and members at the Early Rain Covenant Church in Chengdu, Sheffield's twin city. In February, news outlets, including the BBC, reported the detention of 2 investigative journalists in Chengdu. UK-based Hong Kongers also report transnational repression linked to the Chinese Communist Party regime, creating anxiety for residents, students and businesses in Sheffield. In the context of item 13, could the committee please, 1, set out how the Bringing Sheffield Together campaign will engage Sheffield's Christian communities, Chinese and Hong Kong communities, including students, to promote reassurance, inclusion and interfaith understanding. 2, outline practical measures for 26-27 to counter transnational repression locally, for example, trusted messenger networks, multilingual myth-busting, liaison with universities and police, clear routes for reporting intimidation, hate incidents and safeguarding at civic events, and 3, explain what safeguards and human rights due diligence will apply when any civic activity intersects with the Chengdu Twin City link, so that engagement does not expose residents to intimidation or platform repressive actors, and confirm how progress will be reported back to this committee.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thank you to Clara for raising this set of important issues. I have a longer written response that will be shared with Clara after the meeting and will be published in full on the council website, but let me give a summary of that response for everyone here today. The Bringing Sheffield Together campaign, which is to be discussed later on in the agenda, introduces a positive new citywide piece of work to celebrate the different communities which make Sheffield such an amazing city. This project will unite and promote existing events and coordinate activities which bring people together for positive activities celebrating our city, delivered in communities by our partners and by the council. We will continue to support communities in Sheffield through our engagement and community work. And specific to faith, the Faith and Belief Charter, which was agreed at the end of last year, outlines how all partners will support communities across all faiths, including our Christian communities in Sheffield, to promote inclusion and interfaith understanding. There is a community leaders group focused on developing these cohesive messages and working better together. Members from Sheffield's Chinese and Hong Kong communities are very welcome to be represented here, and we will reach out to them to facilitate this. Christian interfaith roots can support members of the Chinese Christian community with the issues raised and safeguarding concerns. Having this issue raised means that we can now take steps to consider this proactively. When any civic activity connects to the Chengdu Twin City relationship, the Council will seek to apply clear safeguards to protect residents. This will include carrying out proportionate risk checks in advance, particularly where activities involve external partners, public events, or the sharing of information. I will share more detailed information about this in the published written response, but take that very, very seriously, the set of issues that Clara has raised, and we'll make sure that the full response is circulated to members of the committee once it's been published. So thank you very much to Clara. Item number 6 is member questions. This is an opportunity for members of the committee to ask questions. One question has been received from Councillor Crossthorne. A written response has been published and sent round to members, and there is an opportunity to ask a supplementary question if Councillor Crossthorne would like.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the responses. There is a well-known constitutional foundation to local government, and that is that while officers advise, it's members who decide. So my question is, do you, the council leader, are you happy with how the local plan is progressing, and are you happy with the next round of consultation?
I am happy with the local plan consultation. There's been a lot of cross-party conversations around this. As you know, yourself and Councillor Smith were in meetings with myself, Councillor Argencio, Councillor Belbin and others last week to understand how the next phase of consultation will work starting next week. This will be an opportunity for communities in the city, residents from right across the city, to have their say over the main modifications of the local plan. And I would, as I have done all the way through, encourage members of the city, residents of this city, to have their say, to take up the opportunity to have your say about the local plan, about the proposals included within it. And today, I reiterate that there will be a 6-week consultation beginning next week, and I look forward to lots of people expressing their right to have their say and share feedback. All of that feedback will go to the independent inspectors to then make a decision about the local plan. So really important, please do encourage people to participate in that consultation. Okay, item number 7 is the work programme, and I will ask Craig to just run through some details of the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few changes to report on since our last meeting in January. There's one confirmed additional item which is actually on today's agenda, One City, Many Communities. One item has been moved from today's agenda to the March agenda, and that's the international update, and that was just due to the volume of business that we've got today. And then I'll refer members to page 21. There are details there of the council motion that was agreed on the 4th of February on the free travel for children and young people. That was actually a reference to TRC by council. However, due to the potential financial implications, that will need to come to this committee, and we will need to add that to our work programme, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. Good to see that moving forward. And there's always an opportunity for people to ask questions, and I'm not sure whose hands went up first, but Councillor Maroof, followed by Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. It might be prudent if we actually move the burial strategy forward, because there's quite a deal of concern amongst communities that we may run out of space. I know we might not, but there's an anticipation out there that it may well happen. So if we can bring that item forward, that might be a prudent step for this committee to take.
Well, let's, thank you. I think we've been very, very clear, and let me just reiterate that again, that we will not let that happen, that provision will be in place to ensure that there is sufficient burial space. But I understand the concern and want you to think about ways in which we can reassure members of our diverse communities that that is not the case. And I think you and I are both in touch about a public meeting that's going to take place in March to do exactly that. So I hear what you're saying, but let's take that away, but be very, very clear that we've always said throughout this process that we are seeking to provide more burial provision in the city, but in the meantime, before new additional sites come on stream. Oh, has that gone off? Back on. We will not let burial provision run out. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It was just the item on antisocial behaviour for which we have no date yet. I'm sure that we all, as councillors, get complaints about that on a fairly regular basis. So it's just a request if we could put that in the agenda sometime soon. I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. Just on the item that Craig mentioned, the free travel for young people, are we actually going to put that on the work programme, presumably for a date that's unspecified yet, just so that it's logged there? Yeah, right. Thank you very much.
Yes, the intention would be to do this as soon as possible. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So item number 8 is Ending Poverty Together is the name of the report, welcoming the Sheffield Poverty Truth Commission recommendations and supporting residents with the cost of living. And we're joined by a number of guests who will just take their seats. Well, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. And let me first hand over to Tom as the lead officer for this report to introduce himself and then perhaps introduce our guests as well.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Smith. I'm Director of Customer Experience and Communities at the Council. We'll quickly run along and do some quick introductions.
Hi, I'm Keith Island, Head of Service in Communities, responsible for cost of living.
Hi, I'm Jess Thompson and I'm a Community Commissioner for the Poverty Truth Commission.
Hi, I'm Andy Freeman. I'm one of the facilitators of the Poverty Truth Commission.
Hi, I'm Sarah Clayton. I'm a Community Commissioner for Poverty Truth Commission.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Davis. I'm also a Community Commissioner with the Commission.
So, really briefly, Chair, I will run through the report in a little more detail afterwards, but I think given that the report is about welcoming recommendations of the Poverty Truth Commission, which felt it was really important to hear directly from the commissioners, so I think Andy's going to do a quick introduction and then maybe some questions of the commissioners, which will hopefully then inform the conversation afterwards. So, over to you, Andy.
Thank you, and we really appreciate the time. I'm going to talk as little as possible and let our commissioners share a little bit. So you're going to hear from Jonathan, who's going to share a bit more about what the commission was about, and then Sarah's going to share particularly about one recommendation from the report that we think is very kind of like relevant to the conversations this afternoon. I think it's just worth mentioning, I think in your agenda, that you've got a copy of the full report, and we can give physical copies out if anybody wants that. So the Poverty Truth Commission is a national initiative that was adopted in Sheffield and started nearly 3 years ago, and has involved a long process of listening to people with lived experience of poverty and social injustice in the city and putting them together with people who can influence and change and are decision makers across the business sphere, community sphere, and also representatives from the council, Councillor Belbin, and also Kate Joseph as part of the commission. And where we came to was a place of wanting to recommend things to the city so that we can work together, not say that it's the council that delivers everything in the report, but we're trying to work across different sectors to look at responses and ways to deal with the recommendations. But I'm going to let Jonathan share a bit more about what the Commission was like and his perspectives on it. So Jonathan, over to you.
So, can you hear me? Yeah. So the Commission has been going on for quite a while now. It originally started off with commissioners, the community commissioners ourselves meeting up and talking together, and then we got introduced to the civic commissioners, some of whom are in this room today. It has been an interesting experience, but also I think one of the main parts of it is the conversation itself, how we've been talking to each other, rather than people like myself and Sarah going out and saying, well, we went through this, take this away, go and do something about it. That is very different than having a conversation with someone over an extended period of time, where the nuances of that story are able to get across as well. Telling the story once isn't enough. You need to add in the extra bits, the bits of detail, back and forth between the civic commissioners, the community commissioners, and other people we've been speaking to find out what's been going on. Has led us towards creating the report that we put together. And it wasn't something we could have just put together over a few short conversations where we should share stories. It was also talking about those experiences, taking on board what the other person's saying, because we don't always interpret, based on the backgrounds in which we work, quite what that may mean. The nuances, the details of it don't always come across. So when someone takes on board, oh, maybe this would help, we can do this, well, then there's a bit of back and forth. Someone else comes and says, well, that doesn't quite work that way. And over time, we've been able to come up with 3 basic root causes of what we take. There are more, but these are the ones we wanted to focus on, being mental health, young people, and the early stages of development, which can have an enormous effect on poverty further down the line. And yes, we took on the system as well, which is a bit of a complicated one, but we think needs to be spoken about. And a lot of these things that we came up with, it would be nice to be able to have the large MacGuffin, the thing you can say, look, we did this is the thing you can see. But it's also coming across, there is a broader ripple effect, things going on, how we do things, how we engage with each other, the policies we make may fit the task well, but how it's carried out may be different. And these things in themselves can have an effect. If someone is engaging with someone on the end of the phone who's having a bad day, it can make them have a bad day. They respond to the other person on the end of the line in a rather bad way. And it sort of develops and it becomes a combative system. Everyone with expectations. I'm going to have a tough day talking to these people. I'm going to have a tough day doing these different things. Whereas if we can alter some of the approaches on how to do that, we don't just need the big MacGuffin. This is also a small part, things that have a ripple effect that will affect the broader way we approach things, which makes things smoother and will lead to us getting better outcomes, which will affect cost and other things as well. I think I'll pass on to Sarah at that point.
Well, just to introduce what Sarah's going to share, as Jonathan mentioned, each commissioner brought their own experience, and that emphasis on lived experience is something we really want to bring to all of you as something we feel is vitally important in all our decision making. But we also wanted to take time to say, well, would these ideas have helped you in your situation and what you went through in your own experience? And one of the things that we talked about a lot was something called the Brown Envelope Code, which Sarah's going to share a little bit about. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak and thank you for hearing us. So Sheffield Poverty Truth Commission believe that adopting the Brown Envelope Code would be a really important and welcome step for Sheffield City Council. There's more about the Brown Envelope Code that we can talk about later, but it's basically about clearer letters and plain language instead of this bump of confusion. And that clear letters and plain language will reduce confusion and so reduce fear. But at the Poverty Truth Commission, we believe that we can go a little bit further as well. Because for many people that are living in poverty or are in debt, the first point of contact isn't only a letter, it's quite often a phone call. And that phone call can often happen in times of people in crisis. So when someone calls about rent arrears or council tax or debt, they're rarely going to be calm and organised. They're probably going to be frightened. They may already feel ashamed. Many may be carrying other traumas such as illness, abuse, job loss or long-term financial difficulties. And if the response they receive is rushed or unintentionally blaming, it can shut down any engagement immediately. So a lack of empathy doesn't move people out of poverty. It often just pushes them further into it. Compassionate, trauma-informed communication from the first contact changes outcomes. So when staff use clear, non-threatening language, avoid making people repeatedly retell distressing stories, and focus on practical next steps with kindness and understanding, people are more likely to stay engaged. And engagement is what enables change. So people move forward when they feel safe enough to think clearly. When people feel heard rather than judged, they're more willing to work with services to find solutions. So alongside the Brown Envelope Code, we're asking Sheffield City Council to co-create compassionate communication training with people who have lived experience of poverty and debt. Training shaped with those that know what it feels like to make that call. And crucially, frontline staff should also have reflective practice support. If we want compassion at the forefront, then staff need space to process difficult calls and avoid burnout, and to have a recognition that staff too at times need to make that call. So compassion shouldn't be an optional extra. It's central to effective public service when people are living on insufficient funds. So clear letters matter, the Brown Envelope Code matters, but compassionate conversations matter just as much. If we want to see people take steps away from poverty, then the very first interaction with the council must reduce stress, not increase it. So wouldn't it be great to see Sheffield not only adopt the Brown Envelope Code, but lead the way in embedding practical, trauma-informed compassion at every frontline contact, because dignity shouldn't ever depend on your bank balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to hand back to Tom, but we're very grateful that we've been able to work with council officers to begin to think about how we put these recommendations into practice. If you have a look through the report, there's the Brown Envelope Code, but also many more around systems, children, early years and young people, and mental health. And we'd be very happy to talk some more if any of you want to, but I'll hand back to Tom now. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and thanks everybody for speaking to that. It's really helpful to kind of bring alive, I think, the work that you did, which is an amazing piece of work with some really clear recommendations, and hopefully helps to shape a bit about what I will briefly talk about in terms of this report. I'm very conscious of the time that we've got this afternoon. You will see we've set out a number of recommendations in this report, the first of which is to welcome, note the findings and recommendations of the Poverty Truth Commission, as they're set out in the report itself. And in particular to approve measures to respond to a number of those recommendations, including co-creating trauma-informed training, working with the commissioners to do that, and adopting the Brown Envelope Code across all our communications, not just letters, but seeking to do that within our face-to-face and our telephony as well. So we're really keen to take on this piece of work and take it forward as part and parcel of this report. What the report's also doing is taking a recommendation from around about 18 months ago that we agreed with this committee, which was to review our overall cost of living approach and the support that we give to people in the city, mainly using what was the Household Support Fund, and change that into a much more preventative approach, hopefully again taking on board what the commissioners have said and the piece of work that's taken place. The report outlines an independent evaluation which we've undertaken across the city, which again, I think supports the principles within the Poverty Truth Commission report and supports the move that we need to make in terms of some of the changes coming forward. There is an opportunity in this report, so the change from the Household Support Fund into a new Crisis and Resilience Fund, which is coming, which will be a 3-year settlement in terms of financial support, which will allow us to plan ahead and really start to look at the prevention agenda in that space. So we're really keen to take on board the recommendations of the Poverty Truth Commission and the independent review that we've had taken place to deliver on that going forwards. Just very briefly to touch on that independent review. So it is really clear that what was coming out of that review is that whilst the Household Support Fund has done some exceptional work since it was put in place and since 2022 and the piece of work been done, and genuinely income maximisation makes a big difference to families in the city, what we know is that it isn't always getting to the right people at the right time, and we know it is it isn't necessarily dealing with the underlying causes and issues of people's poverty. So really keen to bear down on that. And the independent review is very clear that what works is face-to-face, place-based support in our communities, that we have consistency in the degree of workers, that we have really holistic and person-centred conversations, which is what Commissioner colleagues were saying, and that we're making the connections between poverty and health and how those things interact for people locally. You will see at section 2.3 in particular, 2.5 in particular, there are a number of proposals there, and then further on 2.6, proposals in terms of changing our approach to the cost of living work going forwards, shifting much more to prevention-led, shifting to put our resources much more into interventions that increase household incomes and restore and reduce the frequency of crisis rather than just responding to crisis, and a number of measures also outlined within there. One of the very specific things within this report is that the Crisis and Resilience Fund, because it's designed to be a fund that helps with resilience and financial resilience, in particular is not set up to deliver short-term crisis funding for school holiday meal vouchers, and we need to transition out of those vouchers. So you'll see there's a very specific recommendation in this report, in line with all the work we're doing in that prevention space, to end the provision of holiday school vouchers from May onwards. That's a decent transition, we believe, and over the summer months we will also be doing some work to identify the most vulnerable families and to offer support in that space, and to make sure all of our communications as that fund ends reflect the other support that will be available to those families in terms of financial resilience. So that's mainly what I was going to say this afternoon, Chair, if that's okay. Happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom, and thank you to the Poverty Truth team for joining us and presenting today so brilliantly, and thank you for the work that you've done to shape the report that's before us today. I'll open it up now to questions. Councillor Belbin indicated first, and then I've got a couple here, and Councillor Otten. But Councillor Belbin.
Thank you. Not so much a question, but as Andy mentioned, and as colleagues know, I was one of the civic commissioners on the Poverty Truth Commission, and I just wanted to emphasise, first of all, the importance of what you were saying there about this being a process and not like instead of having kind of one-off meetings where then, you know, councillors, officers or whoever go off and devise their own solutions. The importance of that being a process and an ongoing conversation was really, really important. I think there was one point, wasn't there, Sarah, in our group where we'd gone off down the track because some of our commissioners hadn't been at one of the meetings, and at the following meeting, Sarah came in and said, why are we talking about this? What difference does this make? And it really pulled us back, but it just shows, I think, how important it was to have that ongoing conversation to ensure that we really were addressing the points that were really meaningful and really mattered to you. And I think I haven't just noticed this, but the recommendations that are in the paper today are actually the recommendations that came out of the systems group, and there's a wider set of recommendations that came out of the other groups as well that I think are probably referred to later on. But I was involved with the systems group, so I'm really pleased that I'm already hearing the brown envelope code being referred to across the organisation in lots of ways, and that feels like something that's already starting to get embedded in the way people are thinking about it. I don't know, in the paper we discussed doing an initial piece of work around council tax letters, which I also know from experience. I've seen 24-page long council tax letters which are not helpful to people who are in receipt of them. So I think that's a really positive way forward, and something that we obviously need to keep working on. It will not be a single piece of work. It will not get embedded overnight, but it's something that we'll need to keep working on. And I think later on today we'll be talking about some of the work that we're doing under the Future Sheffield programme, and really ensuring that this kind of approach is really central to that work will be really important. And the other thing I just wanted to mention briefly was how the work around using lived experience around service design, how we're already seeing some real positives by working in that way. So I think some of the work that has been done around rough sleeping, for example, where we have people, you know, a relatively small number of people, but with really entrenched patterns of rough sleeping, and by employing peer mentors who really, really understood what those people were going through, we've had more success than we've had previously in really in helping some of those people actually access accommodation. I think we've halved the rough sleeping numbers of that really hardcore of rough sleepers by taking that approach. And there's lots of evidence there from yourselves and from others around how these approaches really work. And as Tom was talking about, taking that prevention approach is better outcomes for the people who are impacted, but also, you know, the people of Sheffield and where their council tax goes, etc. There are positives there for everybody. So thank you so much to everybody who was involved in the commission. I know we'll be looking at taking forward more commissions in the future, and I'd really recommend to anybody who wants to get involved that they do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thanks very much. First of all, thanks very much for doing the work and presenting it today. And at the earlier briefing we had a really useful workshop session on that. It's really good to see the whole of the Poverty Truth Commission report there and all the CADA research. And reading it, I was kind of thinking, yes, this backs up and codifies what we know. So, of course, what I'm not going to give you all credit for solely is about being able to identify what poverty is and how to deal with it. I think we actually know in the city there is a wealth of expertise about dealing with poverty, about experiencing poverty, and the sad truth of that is that it's because we got far too many people living in poverty in the city, and we know that people who live in poverty are actually damn good at managing their money because they don't have enough to deal with, and they have to make sure that they don't waste any of it, and generally people don't. People are actually really good at that, and we've got that experience there, so that's really important. And it's about, kind of what I'm thinking here is that it's good seeing this because finally we in the council are catching up with that and are acknowledging the need not to be the cause of the problem so much as we traditionally have been. Not just the council, but you know, a lot of the public sector as well as a lot of the commercial sector as well. It's about acknowledging that we can do good and not harm. And Frank quite rightly mentioned those 20-odd pages of benefit letters. I want to say something about the Brennan Envelope Code, which is a really interesting code. And I mean, actually, thanks for introducing to that. I hadn't come across that before your piece of work. I think it will be difficult for the council to introduce this. I think we should all be absolutely committed to it, and we should do what we can. I think it will be difficult because it requires individuality, it requires treating people as humans, and actually that is genuinely difficult for a big system organisation to do. I'm pleased now that it's being led in capable hands, and I think we're going to see some good progress there. I do want to ask about the monitoring of that. So maybe, Tom or Keith, you could tell me what the plan for monitoring the implementation of the Brown Envelope Code is. And then final point is I've got a couple of specific questions about the face-to-face work. So this is the human element of it, and it's been really interesting. So I've been tracking the pilot's been in the south of the city about the provision of face-to-face advice, and it's nice to see what I thought was going to happen reflected in this report about recognising that it's the in-person contact, the trust, it's the choice of where people go to when they want to talk to someone. Never mind ask for advice, talk to someone about the problems they're going through and where they might expect to get a response. So I was just going to ask about the continuity of that. So obviously we have got face-to-face advice in some settings now. I think there's a commitment here to roll that out and recognise that face-to-face advice is a good thing. And that's definitely flying in the face of the government of the last 10 years. But is there going to be continuity now that those ones have set up a track record, certainly in the south of the city, about where those advice makers are? Is that going to continue for the foreseeable future so that we don't agree something in principle but then lose the outcome in practice?
Right. Thank you very much. Councillor Austin, please, then Councillor Argencio, and then I'll come back.
Thank you. So thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to speak to us. I do remember the briefing we had, I think it was December, wasn't it, where we heard from a large group. Some really, really interesting and important things we heard in that. So I think I commend this as a piece of work coming out of that and all the work you've put into it. I do have some questions. I mean, I guess the first one is on that theme. Absolutely right that we base this in lived experience and in conversations and co-design with people with lived experience. I'm slightly surprised, I think, that we've made almost such a big deal of this, in that there is so much, as Councillor Johnson said, there's so much lived experience out there that it shouldn't be hard to find, let me put it that way. I imagine there's quite a few members of the council who have lived experience. Myself, many decades ago, and as a child, which I think is probably different. But I'm sure there are other members of the council who have their own experience of that could be fed in, and it's our day job to do this sort of thing. So we should be those of us with that experience should be sort of feeding into that, even if we're not members of this committee. So I wonder if we've missed out, and council officers too. Council officers, I'm sure many will have had useful experience, and I just wonder if we're not doing enough on our own resources to get that story told. So that's the first question. Second question. So, look, these are all good detailed proposals, which I like to see. Sometimes reports come and they're just very waffly and high-level principles and all that. But it's all stuff we can agree with quite easily, it seems to me, isn't it? Is there not? I mean, we're calling this report Ending Poverty Together, which is an extremely grand title and a grand ambition. Is there nothing difficult that has to be done to end poverty together? Or is there anything that's too difficult that isn't in the report because we wanted to do it but we couldn't? So can I just because it seems we almost make it sound easy, don't we? So can I have an answer to that, please? Final question is a slightly technical one. The recommendation 6 talks about a delegation to award grants to support delivery of Ending Poverty Together, which is this report. And there's a section from the Crisis Resilience Fund, and there's a section of recommendations about that fund and about that element of it. Because it's largely about stuff the council should be doing. Who are we giving grants to? I mean, I can understand if we're involving partners, that might involve it. We're obviously not giving grants of £50,000 plus to individuals to help them out. That's obviously not the implication. So what is it? What is that implication? So those are my 3 questions, if I can. I just also would like to say the income maximisation in pilot in South Lack, I think was great. I think I did really well. I'm glad to see it as a passing reference in this report. We've been calling for many years for that to be rolled out across the city. There is I guess, an ambition reference in the report to do that. Is it finally going to happen? That's, 4th question. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Lots to come back on. Let's do so in a moment, but Councillor Agencio, you've been waiting patiently.
I will not speak for that long and I will not ask questions. I just wanted to say thank you for coming and presenting again to everybody who's presented. Sarah in particular, thank you very much for your very thoughtful mention of compassion several times. People who know me know that compassione in Italian is my favorite word because it has a much deeper meaning in Italian than it does in the English language. Yet the brown letter code is really important, as Sarah said, but I really like what you said about the phone call and also extending the compassion to the staff. And I see this from my personal experience in a day job that often deals with crisis situations and how difficult it is on staff. I've got to say that in my experience when I've supported, doing casework, in supporting people who've been in that crisis situation that have contacted me as a counsellor, and there's been many occasions, I'm sure all of us will say that, is whenever I've asked officers in the council for support for people, they've been amazing and they have made that phone call and it's made a massive difference. I would like to see clearer letters, if possible, when the council tax is recalculated, because people have arrears in particular. Those are the most stressful in my experience, and I've received tons of them over my years as a councillor. And I really like the fact that we are building resilience. We're trying to build resilience with this, not just addressing the crisis itself, but like helping people out of poverty as an aim. And a very important, Tom said this is not addressing the root causes of poverty and why people find themselves in poverty. So I suppose it's our, and I suppose this is also in response to Councillor Otten, it's our duty as politicians to challenge why we have a situation where people are in poverty. And keeping people in poverty is a choice, is a political choice, and we have to advocate for people in Sheffield and in the country as politicians. That's how I see my duty as a politician.
Thank you very much. Let me just use Chair's prerogative for a second just to say that, look, I think just to address Councillor Otten's point around, is some of this straightforward and easy to use that word? No, I don't think any of it is. I think there are deep, ingrained, stubborn inequalities in our city that we have lived with for generations, and it is too easy for all of us to think that this is just how things are, that there will always be a healthy life expectancy gap across the city, that there will always be poorer parts of the city. And as Angela Argencio has just said, this is down to choices that have been made. It was a choice by the last government to bring in a two-child benefit cap that plunged families into poverty. It's a choice that's been made to abolish that cap and lift people out of poverty. It will be a choice for us as politicians today to endorse the recommendations that are set out here. It will be it's a choice that's been made by the government to provide us with £10 million a year in the Crisis and Resilience Fund to be able to do the measures that are set out here. None of this is inevitable, and my frustration with how we talk about the cost of living crisis is that somehow it is seen that this is just how life is, that it is inevitable. There is nothing inevitable about a cost of living crisis, and we shouldn't really be calling it in those terms. People in poverty live with the cost of living crisis every single day of their life, and we need to take every single step we can to address that. And so I think what we can all take today is a recommit, a steadfast commitment from officers and politicians to do all we can to tackle poverty in our city. That requires changing policy, that requires shifting resources, that requires getting cash into people's pockets, it requires giving people agency to live the life that they want with freedom and dignity, and it requires listening to them. And so again, just to address this point about lived experience, should we do more? Yes, always. And I think that's what the recommendations set out, that we need to make sure that that is now hardwired in every single thing that we're doing. Nothing about us without us principles. And so, but do we sometimes need a third-party organisation, external group report to hold up a mirror and say, could you be doing more? Yes, absolutely. And that's what I think the Poverty Truth Commission has done so brilliantly. So yes, we can always do more. And I hope that today we all take from this a commitment to do that. Let me hand back to Tom and the team to just pick up any of the further points people want to respond to.
Thank you, Chair. Before I come on to the specific questions, I was just, Andy was kind of keen just to talk very briefly about the lived experience. So, Andy, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you. So, in terms of the report, I just point you to the end of the report where we talk, I work in the voluntary sector in mental health, that's my kind of day job, and lived experience is a buzzword, and almost everything that's done in every sector of mental health services relies on lived experience, but it really is given time, and it's rarely given time to develop stories. So at the back of the report in page 69 and 70, we make mention of the type and the development of lived experience as being the key thing. I totally agree that we probably all bring lived experiences to different things, but it's giving that time. And coming back to Councillor Johnson's point, you know, we're actually looking at quite a small slice of experience here, you know, like a handful of people, but going deep with that. And I think that's hopefully something that we feel is something that we can learn from ourselves, but also that we want to bring to this experience. But Jess, I know you wanted to say something as well. So.
Yes, just in response to the councillor, lived experience as a term actually comes from the field of sociology, and it's been maladapted, let's say, to the world of strategy. I mean to say that it's a term that's used a lot, but it's rarely understood properly or translated properly. So what I would say is that I, as a person, was involved in the Poverty Truth Commission because of my lived experience of being a carer, for example. And I have a unique perspective in that I also did an internship at the council in comms, and something that was very clear to me very quickly. It's not about individual intentions or ideas. There's a collective and systemic level of things. And I personally, as a carer, could not, overnight change the lived experience of carers in this city, or anything I pitch wouldn't necessarily fix something overnight. But more importantly, it's not actually my duty to do that as the person with the lived experience. The onus should not be on me to suggest the fixes or to encourage people to interrogate them more closely. I'm more than happy to share my own experiences I have throughout this process, and I think it's really important to give a voice to people like carers. Being a carer means that you don't have the luxury of time or resources to come and do things like this all the time, or to really get the word out there. It's a very silent and isolated type of suffering and a constant struggle. But also, like the term cost of living crisis, which I also loathe, it's accurate for some people, but to those it's describing, it's inefficient at best and insulting at worst. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. So just to finish by just answering some of the really specific questions. So there's a question around monitoring of the brown envelope code. So you'll see throughout the report there is a scattering of links between this piece of work and the work that we're doing on customer experience, in particular in the council. We have a customer experience function building whose job it is specifically to be monitoring the council's performance both quantitatively and qualitatively in terms of how we're doing against how it feels to interact with this organisation. So that customer experience function will be tasked with doing the monitor of brown envelope and making sure that we are following up on our commitments in that space. In terms of the very specific recommendation around delegation to award grants, we do work in partnership with a number of voluntary organisations in this space as well. So Citizens Advice Sheffield is the easiest example, but not the only example in the city. So our ability to actually work through the voluntary community, faith and social enterprise sector on this work is really important, because often what people want to do is go to organisations that they trust, being honest about it, and sometimes that's not the council, sometimes a third party is better placed to provide the advice and guidance that people need in this space. So we're really keen to be able to do that. And then finally, I was just going to come to Keith just to talk quickly about the Southlight pilot and our plans in terms of the expansion of that.
Yeah, thank you. The Southlight pilot is demonstrated place-based, face-to-face income maximisation as an intervention in those trusted community settings can have real significant outcomes for families. The Crisis and Resilience Fund gives us the opportunity to scale that model, so taking what's working and scale it up. So we have said we will be expanding locally embedded income maximisation capacity across the city, building on that infrastructure that we've built. When we say, cost of living initially started off, however it was termed, as a crisis, we, worked with the voluntary sector, with our own internal colleagues to create that network of welcome places. We've got family hubs, we've got libraries, we've got numbers of trusted settings that people go into. So we can use that funding to commission or extend advice, and absolutely with regard to the Southlight, trusted relationships take time to build up, and that's something that is borne out in the evaluation. So we very much would be keen to keep that going. But I think we want to integrate income maximisation as the default follow-on from a crisis payment or a housing payment, rather than a separate kind of add-on service or optional service, and ultimately get through to a lot more people than we are doing now. We are doing some good work, but we'd like to be able to reach more people as a city with that intervention. And I'll just touch on a point. One of the ways we are going to do that is implementing a a dashboard. It's called the Low Income Family Tracker, which will allow us to be a lot more on the front foot in terms of proactively identifying households, their levels of income, levels of underclaiming of locally administered support, but also national support. And that we can use a range of different ways to get support to those households. So yes, there's having face-to-face support where people can go, but also by having targeted campaigns that make people aware of what they're potentially missing out on, and how we can support them with that. So very much to start to be data-led with our outreach, as opposed to being sort of crisis-led, which we have been in some parts at the moment.
Great, thank you all very much. I'm sure we could, probably should have a longer conversation around this, but we are a little up against it today. So I'm going to move us through to discuss, comes to the recommendations, and then say a final word in a moment. So on page 34 of the packs, colleagues, you've got a set of recommendations which are set out. There are 8 recommendations before us. Are members happy to support those recommendations? Yeah, thank you very much. Well, look, let me just say thank you sincerely for the work that you've done through the Property Truth Commission and for joining us today. It is much appreciated for you coming and joining, and your contributions help us make better decisions every single day, today and going forward. So thank you. And this is not the end of this conversation. There's a lot more to do. I think you recognise, hopefully, that we're making progress here, but there's a lot more to do. So we'll continue to work with you and colleagues and continue to make sure that your voices are being heard. And if that isn't the case, please do tell us. We want to know, but I'm sure knowing you that will be the case. So just thank you. And colleagues, could you please show your appreciation for our guests who joined us today? Okay, thank you all very much. Right, item number 9 on our agenda relates to the second phase of the City Goals work, which is about how we deliver on the City Goals. And we're joined by a number of guests for this agenda item as well. So thank you all very much for being here and for the work that you've done to shape the report that we're considering today. Perhaps Laura and Jonathan, you could introduce yourselves and then hand over to our guests to introduce themselves as well.
Thank you very much. My name is Jonathan Clifton. I'm Director of Strategy and Communications.
Hi, I'm Laura Reynolds. I'm Business Change Manager who's been coordinating City Goals.
Hi, Louisa Harrison-Walker. I'm the Chief Exec at Sheffield Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, I'm Helen Sims. I'm the Chief Exec at Voluntary Action Sheffield.
I'm Kat Holland. I'm MD at Peter & Paul Branding Agency.
Thank you very much. So as you're all aware, in 2024, Sheffield created a set of city goals. The goals were created through conversations with thousands of residents, communities, businesses, organisations across Sheffield, and they set out an ambitious long-term vision for the future of the city, a fairer, greener and more inclusive city. But most importantly of all, the goals were not just owned by the council, they were owned by the city as a whole. They gave a shared direction for communities, businesses, the voluntary sector, the public sector organisations who can all then align behind that vision because they all have a part to play in turning that vision into reality. So we're here today to update you on the work that's taken place over the last 18 months to put the foundations in place for delivering on the city goals, and specifically to recommend the use of a non-recurrent grant to support the creation of a new partnership lab, which will act as an engine room to help drive delivery of the goals in the city. So I'm going to hand first to Laura just to explain a bit more about the work that's been going on over the last couple of years, and then to Helen, who will talk more about the specific proposal on the partnership lab.
Thank you. So as Jonathan's mentioned, we've already got significant momentum around the city goals. We spent the last year establishing new leadership within the city, which is called Sheffield Stronger Together Leadership Group. And the leadership group are now really embedded in the city. And we're joined by some members of that leadership group today. So we've got Kat, Helen, Louisa, as well as the Chief Executive and our admin leaders. So the Sheffield Stronger Together Leadership Group was established in November 2024, and they've replaced the former Sheffield City Partnership Board. The group have met 6 times so far, holding their meetings in venues across the city, and this has given us an opportunity to hear from different host organisations and, really importantly, the people who use their services. So, for example, we've been to Element Society, which are a charity that support young people with issues such as knife crime, racism and inclusivity. We've been to the City of Sanctuary to learn about the Sheffield Project for Refugee Integration and Growth Partnerships, and we heard directly from some learners who utilise the Sheffield Association for the voluntary teaching of English service, which was fantastic. And recently we went to Pennine 5 to hear about the amazing innovation spine, business innovation and business startups. And our leadership group have really focused on building a culture of trust and relational ways of working to collaborate and to deliver the city goals over the next 10 years as a group of system city leaders. In the last year, the city have also developed 5 core enabling infrastructures, and they will enable us to deliver the city goals. The infrastructures are cross-cutting, and they'll focus on enabling action at community level, making sure that young people's voices shape decisions that matter to them, getting money moving around our city on ideas that matter to people in the places that they live, and measuring progress in ways that people can realistically relate to. So now we're at a moment of galvanising this momentum, and we want to drive coordinated action across all of our 18 city goals. And in order to do that, we feel like we need a central, agile space where collaboration can truly thrive. Without this, we risk siloed working, duplication of effort, slow progress, lost opportunities to reduce inequalities, and failure to fully harness Sheffield's collective power. And that's why we're here today, bringing a proposal to establish a Sheffield Stronger Together Partnership Lab.
So, in the proposal that's in front of you today, there's a lot of learning about what has gone before, and that's really important. So I've led a group from Sheffield Stronger Together Leadership Group to really explore and have one-to-one conversations with leaders in the city about previous partnership work. So just to be really clear, we are very committed as a city to continue to work hard to ensure that the approach we're proposing is different from anything that we've done before. So we've had those conversations. But equally, we've looked at examples of where really solid regenerative work is happening in other places. So I think the way we've established our city leadership is testament to kind of taking a different approach, and actually in exploring that together, we've taken some real inspiration from Melbourne in Australia. And at the end of last year, we had a visit from a representative from Regen Melbourne. And the Partnerships Lab proposal is very much modelled on their approach that they've been developing over the last few years about place-based transformation. So they've developed a systems lab, which is an action research platform which uses knowledge and experiments to enable new systemic conditions. One strong example of a targeted system mission that they're working towards is the swimmable Birrarung. So the Birrarung is the river that runs through Melbourne. So that aims to make sure that the river is so clean that people are able to swim in it, which is an ambitious challenge. But cross-sector actors have come together to work innovatively on that mission. So that's involved developers, academics, an arts precinct, landscape architects, local businesses, friends of groups, working collaboratively. And the Systems Lab has enabled the conditions for alignment on some of those collective causes, such as cleaning up the river, monitoring the return of nature, utilising funding sources collectively to support and drive the work overall, and much more besides. So a portfolio of projects and bottom-up innovation that relates to that swimmable Birrarung aim, and it drives collaborative intervention and really coordinates and enables that system lab to have impact. That's something that's really inspired us as a model. So the Partnerships Lab is very much the second element of Sheffield Stronger Together,
But what it aims to do is create that environment that we've seen work in other places, take us out of our normal ways of working, and really drive that coordinated leadership, collaboration, and importantly, learning over time. Shared learning is such an important principle for this work. So the Partnerships Lab will become Sheffield's collaborative powerhouse. It will be a new team of people, diverse by design, people at different points in their career with different expertise coming and working on that collaborative effort. It will sit outside of any one organisation and embark on the long-term system change work that we know is required to deliver those goals by 2035. To set the team up quickly and with credibility, we will initially host that team, most likely within my organisation, but we are open to looking at the optimum kind of environment for that team to set up. And it will consist of members of staff seconded, working directly in that organisation from different sectors in the city. The lab will work to become fully independent, financially and in status, and the new team will work with and in service of Sheffield Stronger Together Leadership Group. So the key functions of the lab: communications, events and outreach. For example, creating accessible communication material around the goals to ensure people in Sheffield can access and engage. We recognise that the level of participation required to achieve the goals that we've set ourselves needs to be greater than any effort ever before in the city. So that's a really important function. Policy and research, driving data sharing across different organisations in Sheffield and creating novel data sets to support the delivery of the goals. I've been in the Race Equality Partnership Advisory Council today. We've been talking intensively about data, but we need some focused effort to really understand what are the metrics that matter in that space and how do they support the goals. Learning and practice to development. I've said learning is so important to us as a city. We don't always capture the learning. We don't always learn from things that go wrong, and we really should learn at every opportunity. So this brings different organisations together to share that learning in a meaningful way and recognise we can be greater than the sum of our parts. Fundraising and external financing is really key. How we leverage blended investment, philanthropic funding, new sources to fund those individual projects and enable the lab to operate is really important. And I think the work of the lab in its early days will be about understanding and bringing coherence and investable propositions for us as a city. We do so much in our different silos. If you look at what's going on in neighbourhoods at the moment, we've got great stories to tell across the city, but where have we got a coherent narrative around that that can attract and leverage further investment? Programmes and deliveries and support. The example of the Swimble Birrong is a classic one of how you bring that together. But also the lab will support the administration and governance support necessary to build on Sheffield Stronger Together and the approach that's been taken in that governance space. So the lab will increase system-wide collaboration. It will strengthen the role of communities in shaping decisions. We've heard a bit about that already on the agenda today. That's so vital to our City Goals work. It will drive action on health inequalities, mobilise our enabling infrastructures that we've already identified, and generating that new investment into Sheffield is absolutely key. The team will be agile and ensure that learning and best practice is shared, and will be open and transparent about what we're testing, learning and growing so that the whole city can get involved in this work. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We thought we'd just invite Louise and Kat just to give a sort of 1 minute reflection on what the lab could sort of mean from your perspective. I might hand to you first.
Sure, yeah. Firstly, just thank you, Helen, because that was just such a great explanation. And from my point of view, it was really just to echo the sentiment that's been stressed here today in terms of the work that the Sheffield Stronger Together group has done so far and how far it's come in the last few years. As a long-standing member of the previous partnership board, I can really testify to kind of that step change. And I think the thing for me is that the partnership lab really is the missing jigsaw piece now if we are going to actually realise the goals and be able to do them with everybody coming with us on the journey. We've got so far on goodwill and expertise and resource from the people that have been around the table, but we actually need to properly put some resource into this if we're going to take it to the next stage and achieve what we need to by 2035. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure actually to be part of this group. So I joined the Sheffield Together a few months ago now, and I've already got a little event running which is called Form. It's a careers event which will take place on Wednesday.
And we're doing it in Coles, and it is for 16 to 25-year-olds, and it's been an amazing partnership with lots of businesses in the city who have funded it through various social responsibility pots or recruitment pots. And the council have also supported it, but the purpose is to actually look at different ways, taking lots of learning on board from loads of people that we've spoken to about how to actually engage young people in the different opportunities, either via university or via other training routes into industry. And the one thing that's been really amazing is that the Sheffield Together group have connected me with lots of different people that I need to speak to, already doing amazing things, so that we can also take all their learnings and failings along to try and build something that's more successful, hopefully. So I just feel really excited about what's possible if we can have more transparency and more openness from business and public sector, so that we can essentially make Sheffield thrive. I love Sheffield, and I think it's got an amazing set of people here that want Sheffield to be brilliant, and the more transparency and the more conversation that can take place in a meaningful way, although I think the group, it doesn't have a really rigid structure, which is really good, because you can have lots of open conversation and not feel too pressured to go through a big agenda and have really meaningful things come out of it. So from my perspective, I think it's been brilliant, and I'm looking forward to what is to come. Thanks.
Thank you all very much indeed. And look, I've had the privilege of chairing the leadership group for the last 18 months since it was established, and I endorse everything that's been said. I think the way in which people from the public sector, from the private sector, from our communities have come together to try to work in different ways and to learn from each other is exactly as we've just heard articulated so clearly. But I think there's a real recognition in that group that to take this to the next stage, something new is required, and that has led us to the proposal that is here today. And I'd like to pay particular thanks to Laura and to Helen for really driving this proposal forward over the last few months. Right, a number of members have indicated, and there's time for discussion. Councillor Osson was first, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for bringing this. Look, it looks really, really impressive and encouraging. I do wonder if the wild swimming example was written to convince me, in particular, what a good idea it is. I'm a little puzzled on a couple of points, and so if you could clarify this, would be really useful. So, just understanding what we mean by a lab compared to what you know, other kind of partnership working and attempts at innovation we've had in the past. The idea of working in partnership, innovating, obviously, we think is absolutely the way to achieve things. So that's kind of question one. Question two, we're talking about grant funding for funding this initially, hoping it becomes self-sufficient. What sort of revenue sources would it draw on? Because if I understand it, if it's the sort of thing I think it is, it's finding better ways for kind of public sector and public sector adjacent type bodies and community bodies to work together to achieve things. We're all you know, fishing for the same kind of money in the same kind of pots, aren't we? So what does self-funding actually mean? And also, I guess my general puzzlement is, because obviously making a river swimmable is a very specific goal. You can say, well, this is our goal. These are all things we need to achieve. This is what we might be able to do. Let's work out how to do that. I can see how a lab, as I might conceive it, will do that. The city goals are extremely many and varied, aren't they? So I'm not clear, if we agree to spend this money now, what we're actually trying to achieve specifically with that, and therefore how we know what we, you know, how we may judge success and failure or otherwise. So I guess, I mean, that, you know, there are voluntary groups all over the city, including my ward. I'm sure most of them would say the stuff we're doing already is great for the city goals. Can we apply for one of these grants and do a bit more of it? You know, I don't think that's what you're intending, but why not? You know.
Thank you very much, Joe. If I had £1 for every time you mentioned wild swimming, then I would probably not be here. Councillor Argentio, I think I missed you. So Councillor Argentio and then Councillor Smith.
No, I just wanted to make an observation about having been part of the group since last summer. I can't even remember when it was. Yeah, it's quite inspiring really to be in that space. I suppose it's now we're getting out of that space. We're getting, because it's been like a close group of people that have collaborated and worked in partnership and made connections, etc. And now it's about stop talking about it and start doing. So that is what the lab is about. It's about start doing rather than talking.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I love that example of the river in Melbourne. When I was in Melbourne doing some work out there, not even Joe would have jumped in that river. I mean, it was that bad. But that is a very tangible, highly visible thing that people can work towards. And please don't take this the wrong way. Some of the examples you've been giving us for the city goals work are a lot less, or they feel a lot less tangible, a lot less visible. So I'm just wondering if you could either give us some examples of how you can bring that to life, or would the approach need modifying? Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've got 3 more members. I suggest we take a round and then come back and colleagues can offer reflections. I've got Councillor Johnson, Councillor Belbin, Councillor Miskell.
Right, thanks. I just want to say, I'm always a little bit sceptical when people talk about partnership labs and then describe it as an engine room. On the other hand, if you're setting up an office with a team of people in to do some of this important work, that's good and I'm all for it. So that's good. You know, keep to the ordinary English language. I just want to ask about the results. So to answer Joe's question, you said in the reports that the initial funding we've taken from earmarked reserves, and I just want to ask from my point of view what they were earmarked for, and can we be sure that they're being prudently unearmarked whilst we've got a Director of Finance in the room? And the more broad question is about, is there going to be an indication that other of the anchor organisations and or businesses will put some money in at some point? Because to me, it's a bit of a test about whether we got partnership working. Partnership working doesn't work out if everyone just expects the council to put all the money in all the time. So who else is putting their hands in the pocket? Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Belbin.
Thank you. Hope it won't offend officers if I say how nice it is to have so many external people coming in and speaking at our committee meetings. But I think this sounds really exciting and really keen to support it and see how the work progresses. Again, just perhaps coming back to, was it Martin's question? And you referred a little bit in the section there about metrics that matter. And it'd be really interesting to hear how that segment of the work is progressing. Is this something you see the partnership labs taking forward? Because I recall that was one of the strands that was coming out of the City Goals work in the first place. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear more about that. And then flowing on from the previous item, how do we ensure that the lab keeps in touch with the people who establish those goals in the first place, and that we're doing that constant checking and keeping up that conversation, if you like, around those points, because as we heard on the last item, that's such an important way of making sure that the solutions or ideas you're coming up with, really do make the difference to the people that will be affected by them. And finally, I'm just interested in how the ongoing engagement, I suppose, assuming we set up the lab, how that then keeps coming back and reporting back to us at the council, and how we keep in touch with the progress, if you like, of what the board is doing overall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Miskell, please.
Thanks so much, Chair. And I guess when we look at those city goals, there are 18 of them, aren't there? And there are a lot of them. But there's also a huge amount of positivity right across the city, which is typified by the fact that we've got stakeholders from right across the city, from different organisations, different fields, different sectors of our city. I think it's entirely the right thing to do to set up that sort of research lab model. I think it's quite interesting when you look at the paper that one of the alternatives that was mentioned in it would be that we could create, if we didn't want to go down this model, a council-led partnership unit. Now that, to me, would not be an appropriate course of action, because it wouldn't bring the whole city together on this important journey. I think it's also particularly interesting that you've mentioned a lab, and you use the examples, and I know people have kind of laughed understandably about some of the really interesting examples in Melbourne, particularly about how they've used it to regenerate a city there, a river there. But I think one of the things that you have mentioned already is about collaboration on data. And I think that's really interesting because it's quite clear there are lots of organisations, both private sector and public sector and voluntary sector, that hold data. And the previous item about poverty and the great work that the Poverty Truth Commission is doing across our city shows just how important data is to be able to kind of leverage that whole city effort to eradicate poverty in our city. Data is one of those things. Are there other areas that you might see that you would like to concentrate on as well? I guess as part of that kind of action research approach to this in order to be quite nimble as a city to address these 18 city goals.
Thank you very much, everybody. So, a range of questions there, questions around the nature of the lab and how its work will be shaped if this goes forward, questions around the city goals and how more people can get involved, questions around wider partner engagement, and then questions around funding as well. So let me hand back to the team.
Yeah, I might suggest, in terms of this question about sort of the nature of the lab and the sorts of work, I'll just sort of explain why we ruled out the example that Councillor Miskell just, and then I might hand to members of the SST leadership group to bring it to life with some examples. But it would have been very easy for me to have sat here and suggested that I needed a team of people sat upstairs in this building working on partnerships. But I think we have learned from previous attempts at this, the risks that first of all crowds out other organisations and voices very quickly in the city, that the tendency would therefore be to focus on policy rather than on small-scale action across the city, and that certain voices and ways of thinking then sort of dominate that approach. And so I guess the reason we sort of ruled that out was precisely because, having heard from how Regen Melbourne had worked, modelled this proposal on that it sat outside of some of those structures, but was actually able to be more effective in galvanising action from across the city. So I might ask, perhaps start with Helen, but others to pick up the story of some examples of what it could mean in practice and some specific examples.
So I think the term lab is about active action research, so learning by doing. That is the essence of it. And we might not call it a lab in the end, but it's just trying to convey that culture that actually we need to adopt. We need to try things out and learn from them and learn quickly and move on and develop that regenerative journey. That's not a culture that is in practice in all of our institutions. We need to build a new collective shared culture and way of working. We need to act differently together. So that's the kind of essence really and the principles that are behind that and the inspiration from Regen Melbourne. The work that we need to do, I think, in terms of that practice and that action by doing, it needs to be heavily participatory, like how we try things out. So, for example, the metrics that matter. We have held workshops, collective workshops across system with people that are in those professions and have access to all of that data. It's been really illuminating, it's helping us to map things. But actually we need to create some space that's a bit more agile and inclusive and involves people and citizens and lived experience, which we've been talking about here. In hackathon type events that are participatory, where people can get involved and be part of designing action together and generating those metrics so that they're grounded in what matters to people. So that is an example of how we want to take that work stream forward in a live way, in a way that's relatable and meaningful to people and transparent, and talk about that. So that, I think, is one example. We've talked at length about how to make that kind of feedback loop and be in touch with people. And I don't know, Kat, if you want to say a bit about that kind of aspect of this work.
I know these things are running along, but so the event that I'm running on Wednesday was born out of a conversation with the private sector, specifically the Sheffield Property Association, saying they do not believe that enough young people understand the opportunities in the region, and they are struggling to recruit. And so we had a conversation. We're in the SPA because we do an enormous amount of work in the built environment So we had a conversation about doing a different type of careers event that wasn't owned by a university who has quite a specific agenda, or a public sector body that also might have a specific agenda, but actually owned by, if you like, the business sector. And so it's costing around £70,000 to put this event on. £2,500 has come from the council, the rest has come from the commercial sector. That said, the fact that I've been part of these groups has enabled conversations to be faster, better. I've been connected with a wealth of experience and knowledge. And I suppose the drive, you know, we're a branding agency, we don't need to recruit any trades into our business, but we're hugely passionate about finding mechanisms for the city to thrive. And we do believe that a better awareness to careers and opportunities in the city will help that. And the other really important thing that I'm really keen to capitalise on as part of this partnerships conversation is you only know what you know. And so we're, you know, one of the massive conversations we've been having really openly with the universities is that university isn't for everybody. And in our agency, it really isn't a requirement to have a degree. And actually, in some instances, we'd rather you didn't, because you need different thinkers and different minds to do creativity, and that's what we do. So I'm really passionate about finding different ways to engage with different people in our city who have got different experiences, different backgrounds, different education, to connect them to employers. And so this, to me, yes, we've started with the built environment this year, but I absolutely hope I can capitalise on the Partnerships Lab and all the stakeholders in the city to grow it into a bigger event with people that I've met during this process, already doing brilliant things in the city that I didn't know about until recently, to make it better next year and so forth. So I think the funding aspect and the time, to your point, you know, we're putting an enormous amount of time in, but we do need the expertise of everybody from different organisations and bodies. Thanks.
My only thing is just a phrase I just really like about that: you can't change the story if you don't change the storytellers. And I think that's what excites me about this Partnerships Lab, is that it's an opportunity to bring different people into the space to do the work, as well as, you know, we have a very, we usually look to the same people, we go to the same people cap in hand to say, we have this problem, can you help us with it? And if we do what we've always done, we will get what we've always got. So I think that's the thing that excites me the most today.
And then I'll pick up the phone.
I was going to talk to investment, actually, because I think that's a really important point. When we talk about blended investment, there's something about how capital is always coded. So I think blended investment is a blend of public, private, philanthropic. The way that Treasury works is it's pretty risk averse, and it wants to see return on investment in the ways that it understands. So I think in creating a blend and an understanding of what different investors will invest in, what risks they will take, what outcomes and impacts they're looking for, collectively, it gives us a better city view of how we might bring those different investments together. What's our appetite for risk as a city? Do we have that conversation as actors together, as institutions? Do we understand that? And I think that's a key piece of work for the Partnerships Lab to work on, actually, because we really need that foundation to move forward and get longer term investment into the change we want to see. It's not going to happen from any of those kind of singular areas. It will be collectively that we drive that forward. So I think that's really important. And I think to the point about this is grant funding, and yes, we could distribute that to the voluntary sector tomorrow, couldn't we? Many times over. But this is about investment in change, and change in which the voluntary sector want to be engaged in and drive. You know, I'm representing many voluntary organisations when I say that. We are working in a system where actually there's diminishing power and diminishing kind of impact of what we can deliver. We need system change, and so we're really committed to that.
And I'll just pick up the questions on funding. So the approach in terms of reserves that you mentioned, Councillor Johnson, we're taking the same approach as we did with phase one, which is where we have public health earmarked reserves. The Fair and Healthy Sheffield plan set out a number of drivers of poor health across the city: poverty, racial inequality, the quality of the physical environment, and it talked a lot about the importance of partnership working across the city in order to address those. So we feel that this is well aligned with the purpose for that funding. It is non-recurrent, so it will be spread over 3 years, but we are clear that that's the funding period. In terms of self-sufficient funding and the sort of long term, we actually do already. In fact, this evening, two sort of large philanthropic funders are actually in the city asking to learn more about this approach. So we do think there are positive leads to generate funding. We've also looked at models in other places where they actually run programs that people can sort of pay for places, you know. So, for example, in Essex, they run a sort of system leadership cohort where they where different institutions pay for members of their organisation to be part of it, and of course individual projects like a swim walk. We should stop saying boomerang, really, shouldn't we? It's just bringing the Don to it. But when we have specific projects, I'm sure we can also galvanise additional funding around that. So that's the long-term aspiration on creating it as self-sufficient funding. But as Helen said, I think this is really around establishing an infrastructure that allows the city to work in a different way.
Thank you all very much. I think that's absolutely right. There's a lot of energy and excitement about working in new ways, trying new things, learning from those new things, and then applying them in new ways. It might mean starting small, testing things, and then it's crucially about applying that learning. Hence why I think the lab name fits very, very well. So the recommendations are set out on page 199, that they are: this committee consider the proposed Sheffield Stronger Together Partnerships Lab. This will act as the engine room to enable the delivery of the city goals. B, to approve a grant. I'm going to keep saying it. A grant of up to 824,000 from earmarked reserves spread over 3 years. And C, to the extent that it's currently not reserved to them in the Constitution, delegate authority to the Director of Strategy and Communications to administer the grant fund. Are members happy to approve those recommendations? Great. Thank you all very much for your work. We look forward to continuing our work together and seeing the next steps. And good luck on Wednesday. Okay, moving swiftly through then, what I'm going to suggest is we take item 10 and then pause for a comfort break. Right, item number 10 is the revenue budget and capital programme for 26-27. And we're joined by Philip Gregory and Kerry Dallow. Philip, Kerry, thanks very much for being here. If you could briefly introduce yourselves and then introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. So this report presents Sheffield City Council's general fund budget for 26-27, which is recommended by this committee to full council, which meets on the 4th of March to agree the budget. This report presents you with the proposed revenue budget, proposed council tax for 26-27, which also includes precept amounts for other bodies, and the capital programme for 26-27 and beyond. There are a number of recommendations contained within this report on pages 280 and 281 of your pack. So like many local authorities, Sheffield has faced years of significant financial pressure, driven by rising inflation, increased demand in social care and housing, and the legacy of prolonged constrained funding. Successive years of insufficient funding have resulted in the council having to use reserves to balance overspends, with up to 18.9 million more being forecast to be required for 25-26, as reported at Q3 of this financial year. On the 17th of September 2025, the government published a settlement for the next 3 financial years. This settlement brings additional money to Sheffield, partially addressing the post-austerity funding gap, and unlike previous one-year settlements, gives us more certainty over our medium-term financial position. The increase in funding for Sheffield City Council over the 3-year settlement period is 22.5%, totalling £160 million. Now, we had assumed some of this income in our medium-term planning. The benefit above what we had planned is £55.4 million of additional funding. Every local authority is legally required to set a balanced budget before the financial year begins. The definition of this is a sound plan that shows how income will match expenditure and which takes into account cost savings, local income, and the use of council reserves. The settlement included a clear policy directive from government on their assumption that council tax will increase by the maximum allowed in each of the 3 years, and this is included in their calculation of core funding. The maximum increase for council tax without a referendum is a total of 4.99%, which is made up of a 3% increase in council tax and a 2% adult social care precept. My recommendation as the council's chief financial officer is to increase council tax by the maximum allowed at 4.99%. The committee is also reminded that in addition to setting a balanced budget, it's prudent to consider the council's overall financial sustainability. The intention of this has informed our approach to budget setting, where we prioritise supporting services where there have been significant cost pressures in the current and previous financial years. The budget report documents financial investments in service budgets, which are expected to minimise the risk of a significant overspend in year during 26-27 and beyond. So included within this report are several key appendices that I will draw your attention to. So the savings proposed in Appendix 2 of the report have been reviewed and have been assessed as deliverable. Officers have been careful not to include unrealistic savings that can't be delivered. The Future Sheffield Transformation Programme is expected to start delivering savings from 26-27, which are included in these proposals and which there was an update on the agenda of this committee. Our reserve strategy in Appendix 5 shows how the Council's plan to use our usable reserves. These total around £234 million at 31st of March this year. It is worth noting that most of these reserves are already earmarked for specific uses. The Council's General Fund reserve is being increased to £21 million, which at around 3% of proposed net budget is appropriate. Our use of reserves will be reviewed in detail as we update our medium-term financial strategy in summer. Appendix 6 contains the full council tax calculation. This was shared in the supplementary paper which was issued today. That includes the full details of all precepting bodies and includes the full council tax demands, which include the Sheffield City Council elements of council tax, in addition to all the precepting bodies, including parish councils where appropriate. The Council's Treasury Management Strategy is included in Appendix 7. This sets out our compliance with the SIPFA Prudential Code, as well as guidance from SIPFA and from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government on investments and capital financing. Treasury management ensures the Council has the cash required to fund operations and investment of any surplus cash, as well as the financing for capital transactions. The strategy sets out the Council's prudential indicators, which include our borrowing limits, our approach to debt, and our current debt portfolio. The strategy sets out the minimum revenue provision policy, and Council are asked to approve this when they meet in March, to ensure that the Council pays down debt in an appropriate way. The Council continues to be under-borrowed, where the Council's resources are used to fund capital rather than borrowing. As we receive lower interest on our cash balances than we pay on borrowing, this remains a financially advantageous approach. Appendix 8 is the Equality Impact Assessment, which includes the consideration of responses to the budget consultation. The response rate across the city significantly improved in comparison to previous years, with over 1,600 responses to the online survey this year. However, we will continue to consider how we can improve engagement and consultation with residents on budget proposals in future. Appendix 10 contains a summary of the consultation responses from both the online survey and from discussions with the Sheffield Chamber of Commerce and with voluntary, community and faith sector leaders. Feedback is largely supportive of the proposals contained within the budget, with some suggestions on how the Council can work more effectively. Appendix 9 is the Council's tax strategy. Whilst we're not required to publish a tax strategy, we choose to do so to transparently document our approach to the management of our tax affairs. The Council seeks to lead by example in how we handle our tax affairs, and we take all reasonable steps to pay the right tax at the right time. The Council maintains a low risk appetite to tax, and while we will take reasonable steps to minimise our tax liability, we will not use artificial structures or undertake transactions to evade tax, maintaining a commitment to our ethical procurement policy. Appendix 11 is our pay policy statement for 26-27, which we are required to publish for full Council to approve, an updated version of which has also been published in the supplementary paper. The pay policy includes remuneration for chief officers, the exit cost policy, the policy on remunerating the lowest paid in the workforce, and the approval route for salary packages in excess of £100,000. Any amendments that may be required during the year will require further approval by full council. Part B of the report, starting on page 395, outlines our capital strategy. This sets out the capital programme for 26 to 2031, with a longer-term view of capital all the way through to 2055. The impact and range of projects that the council fund through the capital programme can be seen in the document, split by policy committee, which total over £680 million over the next 5 years. Individual capital schemes will be brought back to committees for separate approval. Page 428 of the pack shows how we plan to fund the capital programme and the available funding sources, while page 437 documents the governance arrangements for the capital programme. On page 238 of your report pack is a statutory statement on the sustainability of the budget and the adequacy of reserves. This is known as the Section 25 statement. Part of my duty as a Section 151 officer under the Local Government Act 2003 is to review the robustness of our assumptions in setting the budget and the use of reserves and report to members when agreeing the annual budget. This section of the report sets out the analysis that supports my opinion on both the robustness of the estimates used to set the budget and the adequacy of reserves. The settlement also included the announcement that the government has agreed to fund 90% of local authorities' dedicated schools grant deficits through a high needs stability grant. Further details of this announcement and the implications and the resulting financial pressure from the remaining 10% that won't be funded is still being worked through. The clarity on this approach, though, announced in the final settlement is welcome. I'll hand over to Kerry, who will talk you through further details on the budget settlement.
In the settlement, the government has introduced changes to the way funding is distributed to local authorities, known as Fair Funding 2, which better recognises deprivation and local need. The changes to the needs formulae have resulted in Sheffield being allocated a larger share of funding than under previous settlements. The government also announced the continuation of the recovery grant for 3 years, which has contributed £10.5 million more than previously assumed. These and other smaller changes have resulted in Sheffield receiving a £25.1 million increase in funding for 26-27 and £52.4 million over the 3-year period. This equates to a £22.5 increase in core spending power, which is the total of government grants, council tax and business rates. This funding, alongside a programme to deliver sustainable savings, has enabled the council to reduce its budget gap from £7.7 million reported in the medium-term financial strategy in July 2025 to zero, meaning we have been able to propose a balanced budget today. The settlement provides welcome stability and will enable longer-term planning, but the recovery grant is only confirmed for 3 years, which creates a potential funding cliff edge in 2029-30, which the council will need to plan for. Despite this, we are now projecting to enter a more stable financial position than in recent years. The additional funding has allowed the council to increase budgets for social care, placements and SEND transport to more accurately reflect the growth in demand and rising cost of these essential services. This should reduce the risk of significant overspends arising in 26-27. However, it is essential that the council remains disciplined and focused on delivering its savings and committed to ensuring its long-term financial sustainability. The Council's Future Sheffield programme is the route to achieving that. This ambitious transformation programme is expected to deliver the majority of the Council's savings over the next 3 financial years, with £10.4 million planned in 26-27 and £76.9 over the full 3-year period. But the programme is not just about saving money, it's about becoming the council we want to be, better engaged with communities, focused on enabling residents and supporting local businesses, using technology to work smarter and working better with partners to achieve our shared goals. So in summary, our approach to setting the budget in 26-27 has prioritised 2 things: using the additional government funding to address existing pressures rather than taking on new financial commitments, and delivering sustainable, repeatable savings and investing resources in transformation rather than relying on one-off fixes.
So in conclusion, the budget report details how the council will allocate its resources to achieve the ambitious goals that we've outlined in the council plan. The mission of the council plan is together we get things done, and this sets the tone for how we continue to plan for our budget position and how we have a balanced position for 26-27. I'd like to pay particular thanks to the finance team who've worked over many months to pull together the information before you in collaboration with officers and members from across the council, again demonstrating how we live our values. we're happy to take any questions or comments the committee may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both for setting that out so clearly. Obviously, this goes through to full council next Wednesday, so this is not the end of this particular conversation, as I'm sure members will be aware. But there is a time for questions and any clarification now. I think it's £5 to Lord Mayor's Charity. And Councillor Crosthorne has indicated first.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth saying straight away, you touched on it at the end, but the work that's gone into this, it's not just Philip and Kerry sat here. I'm sure that there's a big team behind the scenes as well who have worked months on this. I mean, what's the report, 400 pages long or something? So I dread to think the amount of work that's gone into producing those 400 pages. So yeah, thank you for all the work that's gone into that. My point is probably more of a narrative type point, because when a few months ago we voted on introducing the community strategy into the council, and so when I was reading the capital strategy in this, I did see a few things like the new play equipment at Firth Park, work at Shirebrook Valley, Forge Dam, the new play equipment in Mosborough, where it, while it might be the council that's helping deliver that, it's really the communities that have driven it. And I think that in a way, we need to celebrate the community involvement in the work that we help deliver a bit more. And if we are to bring in the cultural shift that I think we do want to bring in genuinely, then I think we need to sort of change the tone of these reports a little bit to start celebrating the community work. So that's a sort of polite prod in a way. I hope that that's not taken as criticism, because I do think a lot of great work has gone into this.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any other members who want to come in on this particular point? Councillor Miskell?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's probably worth noting the high number of responses to the consultation that was attached in the paper. I think around 1,600 people did respond, and that's really, really positive. And the majority of those people agreed with many of the plans. And I'm really interested, I guess, for me as being Chair of the Transport, Regen and Climate Policy Committee, that people supported the transformation that we are proposing in terms of transport in our city. And it was really positive to see that, and particularly how people supported how we wanted to improve air quality, how we wanted to tackle poor quality public transport through things like bus franchising that's happening in October 2027. And I think all those things are supported by the work that is mentioned further down in the paper when it comes to the capital programme. I guess it's also a wider point as well about the whole process. And I kind of remember back in 2022 when I think Rishi Sunak, who was then, of course, Prime Minister, said to us, didn't he, in that clip that people might remember that was leaked, he said that he was diverting public money from urban areas. And of course, those urban areas were towns and cities exactly like Sheffield. And he was very brazen about that. I guess now we're seeing the reprioritisation of towns and cities like Sheffield, and this is really to be welcomed. I'd be really interested for your reflections on when we can get cracking and whether that can be straight away with a 2-year budget in due course after we have accepted this one, so that we can have even more stability over the next few years, thanks to the government settlement.
Thank you very much. I believe it was in Tunbridge Wells talking about how he changed the funding formula to make sure that places like Tunbridge Wells benefited at the expense of deprived urban areas, and the reconnection of funding to deprivation in the fair funding to reforms that have been set out by this government are extremely welcome, and I'm sure endorsed by everyone here in this committee. Before I hand back to Philip and Kerry, are there any further comments? No, in which case, Philip and Kerry.
Thank you. So just to come back, if we could make the report any shorter, I think we would do. Having said that, we are trying to be really open and transparent in terms of what we publish and produce. And I think that's part of why this is such a long document, is is because actually we are being really open with the information that we share, not just with the committee, but with the public. And I think that's important to state that that's one of the reasons this document is so long, is that there is a lot of information contained within it, which again we're making publicly available in a bid to be transparent about how we set the budget and how this process works. I take the point Councillor Costa on the need to recognise the work in communities and the work of community groups in developing schemes that will come forward. We are looking at how we review the capital strategy as we look to refresh the medium-term financial strategy in summer. So again, we're looking at a thorough refresh of the capital strategy, and as part of that, we can feed in your comments into how we think about that. And then in terms of the two-year budget process and what comes next, so we've said that we will set the budget for 26-27 with full council, and following that process, we'll start the process of looking at the next 2 years. So the 3-year settlement gives us the ability to plan with some confidence for years 2 and 3, so for 27-28 and for 28-29. We can start that process in spring this year and start working that through. It's worth noting that for each of those subsequent financial years, there will still be a budget report like this that will still go through to full council the March before the financial year starts. So we won't be circumventing any of the process. That process will still happen each financial year, but we can start planning for that much earlier.
Great, thank you very much. We are going to move through, if that's all right, just because I did indicate, and we've got still 3 more agenda items. Is there a particular point of clarity you want?
I'll ask you briefly, and we
please.
can take this up outside. I just want to check, the savings that are proposed there, have they all been run through the groups? Because I think I'm seeing savings here that were not run past the groups. Are they?
They were.
Yes, they would have been. Unless they were savings that were already, so in adults there were some savings that were already in delivery this year that have already been approved that are rolling forward into next year. But otherwise, yes, they would have done.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me check this with you later. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. So, the recommendations are actually set out in the supplementary report that everyone should have a copy of on their desks. There are 2 recommendations. The first one has points A to P. I'm not going to read them out, but can I ask that members do just have a quick look at those recommendations, because they're not the same as the set out in the pack that was first published, but they have now been published. Just to note, the original set of recommendations did make that clear, that there would be further information coming. The first recommendation approves for submission to the meeting of the City Council on 4th of March the recommendations as set out below. And then, as regards to the capital strategy, again, approves for submission to the meeting of the City Council on 4th of March the recommendation to approve the contents of the capital strategy and investment pipeline. Are members happy to support those recommendations? Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Philip and Kerry. So, we've got 3 more items to go, items 11, 12, 13. I'm going to suggest we have a 5-minute break now. So, actually, it's 3:53. Let's come back at 4 o'clock, and I will press that bell so 4 o'clock back. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, we're back, everybody. Thank you very much indeed. So we've got 3 more items today on our agenda. First up is item number 11, which is the Future Sheffield Update report, and we're joined by Mike Jackson and Catherine Mills. If you could both introduce yourselves for the benefit of people in the room and anyone watching online, and then introduce the report, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So Mike Jackson, Interim Chief Operating Officer.
And Catherine Mills, Assistant Director of Transformation.
Okay, thank you. So this is the first of what we intend to be regular quarterly reports to this committee, which we feel is an appropriate increase in the level of member oversight of Future Sheffield, as we're now moving into a very significant period of delivery. I think it's also impossible, actually, to overstate the importance of Sheffield to the operation of the council. It is about how we intend to deliver the council that we want to be, as we've heard from other speakers today, a council that's better engaged with its communities, delivering better customer services to its residents, getting upstream in terms of focusing more on prevention, being smart with technology and led by data. That might sound like it's something that is all about systems and processes and long term, but we believe the residents of Sheffield are already experiencing the benefits of this approach. If you've had a chance to read the report, there's reference to the fact that our website now is that much more accessible because of some of the investments that we've made. My account comes on stream in March, which will make life much easier for our residents who want to access the council's digital services. So you'll be able to see in one place all the inquiries that you submitted to the council. You won't have to keep keying in the information, your personal details. So some really kind of practical steps forward that are either already with us or are about to happen. And I couldn't help but note that Tom Smith referred to the fact that the customer experience programme is already building in the benefits of our learning from the Poverty Truth Commission, and Keith Leyland referred to the fact that we're taking a much more data-led approach to how we want to be more preventative and get upstream in supporting low-income families across the city. So in many ways, and there are many others we could talk about, Future Sheffield is already seeping into the DNA of the organisation, and that's how we want it to be. So as I say, it felt appropriate for it to come more regularly to members so that you can help us shape that and to see the progress that we're making. We've also heard from Philip Gregory and Kerry Darlow today that Future Sheffield is absolutely at the heart of our medium-term financial plan. The savings that Future Sheffield will drive is absolutely critical to the ongoing financial sustainability of the council. So it felt right that we come here regularly on a quarterly basis. I'm going to stop there in terms of introductory remarks, but Catherine and I will have a go at answering any of the questions you've got on the report that's in front of you. And because Future Sheffield is about everything that we're doing now, obviously there are lots of senior colleagues in the room who may be able to help with specific queries on different elements of the programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Perfectly illustrating that this is a whole council approach and a joined up approach involving all parts of the council. So, opportunity for members to ask any questions that they would like or any feedback on the paper. Councillor Smith and then Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I was intrigued by something in section 1.3 about improving the level of trust in the council. So we're going to become a more trusted council. Could you, I understand the improvements, I understand the cost savings, but that's quite an intangible thing. How are you going to measure it? How are you going to achieve it? Thank you.
Okay, let's take a round. So we've got Councillor Austin, then Councillor Belvin.
Thank you. So, Future Sheffield, I'm one of the members on the members group, so we do get briefings on this. As has been said, it's a transformation programme to achieve all the good things that you've just said, Mike, and to spend the revenue spend that we have in an efficient and cost-effective way. So on page 653, there's a list of the savings for next year's budget that's come out of this. Now, I would like to ask how much of that is reflective of transformation, the positive transformation talked about, and how much of that is, let's say, salami slicing or traditional things. I am concerned that we haven't kicked off in the right spirit achieving the transformation we have, and we've instead chased budget targets, using the Future Sheffield process to do something that we've always done sort of internally, and therefore using expensive management consultants to do things that we could do ourselves.
Okay, and then Councillor Belvin, please.
Well, I have to come back on that first of all. I think that's a complete mischaracterisation of what is going on here, frankly. And yes, we have been using management consultants to look at what's going on, but when you look at the programmes of work that sit behind these layers, to call it salami slicing is, as I say, a complete mischaracterisation of it. And I'm a bit surprised, Joe, because to be honest, we have sat here, we've discussed many of these pieces of work at this committee and at other committees, and indeed at full council from time to time, when we talk about the nature of the transformations that we've been doing, for example, around homeschool transport, which I'm sure Dawn can talk about, it is not about making cuts, it is about doing things more sensibly, it is about taking a really rigorous look about working with parents and children themselves to find out to take an approach that will work for everybody. And I think to call it salami slicing by consultants is just completely wrong. What I did want to ask was to really come back to, as we're getting into the detail of this work, and I know we've talked about it outside of these meetings, is we are finding that the resource we need to deliver what we will need to deliver, and this is something that is growing and that we are learning and discovering as we go along. And I suppose it'd be good to understand how far you think some of the predictions that we have made in terms of savings alongside better outcomes, which is what the work is aimed at, how much are we having to shift and change as we're getting into the nitty-gritty, and how will we, as we do on occasion, have to put more resource into elements of the work? How can we demonstrate how that will still continue to deliver savings, if it will, but also continue to deliver the outcomes that we need?
Thank you very much. So let me hand back to Mike and Catherine on those particular points.
Okay, so firstly, the question about trust. As everyone knows, you kind of can't do trust. You have to earn it. But I welcome the question because it enables us to make the point that Future Sheffield is as much about the way we work as what we do. One of the areas of the programme that we've started to develop more recently is the organisational development strategy that needs to go alongside, if you like, the more programmatic part of the work, which is about supporting our people to work and behave in the way that we'd want them to do. So we're going to be making sure that we help everyone to understand how you go about trust. And we heard earlier about implementation of the community strategy, making sure that everyone understands the importance of taking the time to listen to what residents want. If you make commitments, keeping your promises, all of these things are things that you can encourage the organisation to understand their importance and to systemize in the sense that they're things that ought to feature in people's personal objectives. As I say, they're things that you can make sure are part of our induction process, that anyone who comes to work for the council understands is important to us. So trust is building trust, and the other things that we say are important about how we work are as much about Future Sheffield as delivering a particular piece of IT investment or new technology. How we work is important, and that's one example of that. In terms of savings, I think it's fair to say there are an element of the year one savings that are more tactical, if you like. So the scale of the transformation that we're progressing is going to take some time to get fully in place in some parts of the council. So some of those year one savings are more tactical, but they're in the direction of the transformation that we want to make. So what we've been very careful to do is that those savings are things that build towards the more fundamental transformation that will deliver actually the much more significant levels of savings in years 2 and 3. And in terms of Councillor Belbin's question about investment, we do say in the introduction and in a number of other parts of the report that we are likely to need to invest significantly more than we've currently budgeted for in order to deliver the level of ambition that sits within Future Sheffield. Over the last few months, we've been putting a lot of effort into doing some more robust resource planning around what it's going to take to deliver Future Sheffield, which we hadn't been able to do previously. And we're starting to see the results of that, which does suggest we are going to have to invest more. We've already made some incremental additional investments, particularly around HR capacity. The kind of transformation we're talking about is creating a significant demand on HR, IT, and other of the enabling services. And Philip Gregory was referring earlier to the refresh of the medium-term financial plan that we'll be taking forward in the spring and summer. And as part of that, we'll have the opportunity to talk to members about the need for that additional investment and look at that alongside the other priorities for members. But certainly delivering the scale of ambition that we want as a council for future Sheffield is going to require additional investment that we haven't yet budgeted for. But the good news is the 3-year settlement that we've got, does give us provision to do that, and we want to talk to members about that in more detail over the summer.
Great. Thank you very much. Catherine, is there anything you wanted to add? Okay. All right. Well, look, as Mike began by saying, this will now be a regular quarterly update to this committee, and leaders in the administration will also receive regular updates outside of that cycle, so to make sure that there's clear political oversight of this process, and we will continue to do so from this point onwards. So thank you very much for the work that's gone in to get us to where we are. There are recommendations set out on page 651 to note the current financial position and the link between the medium-term financial strategy and Future Sheffield to address these, to note the progress being made to deliver the Council's Future Sheffield ambitions as set out in Appendix 1, note the ongoing changes that will take place across Future Sheffield and the associated benefits and risks, note the proposed next steps for Future Sheffield to progress with the implementation as set out, and note the changes in governance and oversight arrangements now in place to ensure progress, risks and mitigations are appropriately managed. Are members happy to back those recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, item number 12 is about the future of proposed special and alternative free schools in the city. And this begins on page 693 in your packs. And we're joined for this item by Joe Horobin and Matthew Pearce. Great. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for your patience. If you could briefly introduce yourselves and then introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Hi, Joe Horobin, Director of Integrated Commissioning. And I'll just say a quick few words and then Matt will take us through in a bit more detail. But there is a lot in the news today and in preceding weeks that sets out a significant overhaul and investment in provision for children with special educational needs and disabilities or who need support to remain in school. And we are eagerly awaiting more detail and digesting what is available to us as, colleagues working on that as we're here. But meanwhile, we want to bring you this report, which sets out recommendations that actually enable us to move really quickly and in alignment with our own published SEND strategy and national policy direction to develop new alternative provision and specialist education places in the city. So I'll hand over to Matt to introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Joe. So Matthew Pearce, Strategic Commission Manager for Education. Just to talk through the paper itself, just as a brief kind of recap, Sheffield has 3 proposed alternative provision of special schools. We have a joint special school with Barnsley, an alternative provision free school with Minerva, and an 80-place STMH school with Wellspring. For the purpose of today's conversation, that 3rd school is out of scope. I think it's just important for people to note that, and that 3rd school remains in progress. So just in terms of the DfE's position, they wrote to us just prior to Christmas, as they did with all local authorities in the AP and special free school wave, with the option of either continuing with the schools or receiving additional capital funding to provide the equivalent number of high needs specialist places locally via other means, which for us equates to 220 places. The capital that's an offer from the Department for Education is £10.34 million, and the deadline for a decision is the end of this month. So just in terms of what we've outlined in the paper as a recommendation, we are recommending to accept the offer of additional capital funding to develop the 220 high needs specialist places via other means. The rationale for this is outlined in the paper in terms of what I would highlight around that. So this recommendation does align with our local strategic focus on belonging, working into localities and meeting need earlier. As Joe's alluded to, we're still digesting the white paper that's come out today, but from what we can see in that, this recommendation aligns with that direction of travel nationally. Thirdly, in terms of timeframes and impact, taking this option enables us to develop provisions sooner than would otherwise be the case, which means we can have an impact sooner on Sheffield's families. There's a strong need out there now that we need to help address. And as is outlined in the paper, the position of Barnsley and Minerva Academy Trust, that aligns with our recommendation, and they're looking to go in the same direction. In terms of taking the work forward, we're anticipating 3 themes of activity. So firstly, around localised high-need SEND bases targeted at areas of highest need. Secondly, a focus on new alternative provision bases with a real focus on preventing children from being excluded and also reintegrating children who are able to do so much more effectively. And thirdly, expansion of our existing special school provision where we are able to. As I've touched on, alongside this, we are going to still be delivering our new 80-place special school as well. So I guess just to reflect around that, there is an opportunity here for Sheffield to deliver more of what aligns with our strategy. In terms of our engagement with partners in developing this paper and recommendation, it has been positive. There is a clear consensus, this is a genuine opportunity to improve our approach and do more of what works for us here in Sheffield. In the paper, we've outlined a number of key risks associated with this recommendation. I think the ones that we would probably highlight is, firstly and most keyly, we need to ensure we have a strategic needs-led plan to deliver these places. There is a risk of, the pressure that's in the system that we could lurch into doing this and doing that. We need to make sure this is a really well thought out strategic approach, ties in with all the other work that we do in this space, and works close to our partners across education, health and care. In terms of the sufficiency of the funding provided, it is a challenging funding allocation. We need to make sure that we spend the money wisely. We need to do robust feasibilities. Sheffield has challenging sites. There are lots of hills here, as we all know. That does bring challenges. And then consistency and quality of practice. This is not just about capital and buildings. We need to get the practice right in those schools and those provisions. And there's a lot of work already going on in the city around that, but this reinforces the need to focus on that. So in terms of our next steps, anticipating we'll be developing that plan for the 220 high needs places. But as I say, that needs to form part of our wider sufficiency work and SEND strategy. And that real focus on belonging that we're bringing through all our work, and then subsequent progress will come through to the Education, Children and Families Committee. Jo, I don't know if you want to add.
No, that's great, thanks.
Okay, thank you both very much. I've got Councillor Dale, who's indicated, and Councillor Crossthorne and Councillor Agencio.
Thank you, Chair. I think just in support of the report, really, this has been a big conversation that we've been having a long time, actually, prior to the letter from the DFE about how we were actually going to be able to provide the places and spaces for our children and young people across Sheffield, looking at all of the other transformation that's been happening in education, children and families, and how we look at ensuring that all of our children and young people feel like they belong within their neighbourhood, within their community and within their school. Children should be able to go to school and feel like they're part of their school community near to where they live. They should be able to make friends with peers within their own community. They shouldn't have to be transported across the city to a school that can provide care for them. So I think what Matt has said is right. This is not simply about building spaces. This is about ensuring that we have got the right spaces in the right places and the right quality and the right level of support for the children that are in those spaces and those places. And I think parents, when we talk about trust, will be able to trust us when we can make sure that they are feeling confident that we can provide those places for their children in mainstream settings or units or whatever that might look like yet in Sheffield, because we're still having those conversations with our partners across the education sector, whether that be maintained or academic settings or alternative providers. So I'm confident that the work has been going on prior to the announcement anyway. We've been building relationships across the sector to come up with a plan as part of our belonging framework and our SEND strategy. So I'm just in support of this report. I think I would be happy to keep coming back and giving members updates as to where we're at with this, particularly if it's going to be in your neighbourhoods and your communities. I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dale. So I've got 4 members who've indicated: Councillor Crosthorne, Argencio, Johnson and Maroof. Can I see if there's anyone else? No? Okay. If people could keep their comments relatively brief, just because if we can, I want to make sure we finish in time so that people can get home to break their fast. Councillor Crosthorne.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the sites that was originally being considered for a dedicated SEND school was a site in High Green that's currently occupied by High Green Development Trust. And so I'm really pleased now that we're able to find a way that gives the much needed SEND capacity that we need in this school, in this city, while also protecting such a valued community organisation. And I know it's been a stressful time for the trustees of High Green Development Trust, so I just wanted to place on record our thanks for their patience as we've been going through this, but also the work that officers have put in I know it's been a very long process getting here, and also the relentlessness of the work that the local councillors have put in to stand up for High Green Development Trust. They have been fantastic local ward councillors fighting for that. So looking forward, I hope that we're able to possibly take advantage of a new community building strategy with High Green Development Trust. And it'd be interesting to hear if there's been any discussions about that. Thank you.
Councillor Argencio, please.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. I'm not sure whether any of my colleagues are former teachers. I'm a former teacher, secondary school teacher for 16 years. And whilst I support the overarching kind of philosophy behind the paper, I'm just concerned that it doesn't really address the reasons why education is so difficult. I mean, lots of this stuff that are in the paper were in place when I was a teacher, and they were scrapped by the government of the time. So it's just reintroducing things that happen, and that, like in the NHS, it goes in circles and comes back to the same place. I am, amazed that teachers are not trained in SEN thing, because that was part of my training when I did my PGCE, and we had to plan for kids were in classrooms at the time with special education needs, and we had plans for each one of them, and we had to adapt our lessons and differentiate and all of that. So also I have a doubt about resources and how, if it's enough, and how long it's going to take, and if it's really addressing the poor resources. And my last one is about academies, which were eventually the reason why I left teaching, because they operate or tend to operate on a business kind of structure level, and they, in my experience, they really didn't care about the kids, and that's why I left. So how do we address these in academies, which is basically all of our secondary school, but one in many of our primary schools, and how can we implement this in secondary schools? Because the first thing my academy trust did, they decimated the SEN department, where it went from 7 staff to 2 in a year. So that is the thing that really worries me, is where the resources are, but fundamentally addressing the, how education is in this country, where we set schools against each other with league tables, etc., which is completely detrimental to pupils' education.
Thanks. Let me just come in for a second. I think what's been set out today in the SEN white paper is about the policy direction for how provision in schools is going to be delivered over the coming years and decades ahead. The decision we've got ahead of us today is about whether or not to to accept a particular amount of capital in relation to a specific set of schools. Today, £4 billion has been announced to provide more support to schools across the country alongside the SEN white paper. So I think if we can just hold on to that for a second. We will have lots of discussion, I am absolutely sure, here and at Children, Families and Education Committee about the implications and what's included in the SEND white paper. I think the other thing I would just say, though, is that I do have to sort of just take objection to the idea that multi-academy trusts don't care for children. I think we've got some fantastic multi-academy trusts in this city who every single day are providing good quality provision and care for their children. And we can have different views about the ideological nature of how academies came into being, but I think we work on a daily basis with a wide family of schools in this city who are doing their best for their communities and for the children that they look after and teach every single day. So I just want to sort of put that on record, that I think we need to be clear in our support for the teachers and school leaders in the city who are doing good work in difficult circumstances on a daily basis. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, yeah. So I think on the decision itself about accepting money, it's a bit of a no-brainer in the sense that we are where we are. But I did want to ask about the impact of it. So obviously, the really difficult question is, how does this fit with the decision that's sort of being announced as we speak? The answer may be that you can't provide that now, but actually if you could give us an indication of when we could have a briefing on what this all means, it's some pretty major changes. And when it comes to the specifics of this, the question really is, will this amount of money be enough to provide the same number of places in alternative provision, etc., and integrated settings, as it would be if you just had a new freestanding, new-built school? Because it seems like the actual cost of delivering a provision that's better, because it's more integrated with mainstream schools, will be more expensive per head, and therefore there won't be enough money to go around. 10 million might sound like a lot, but actually in this context it doesn't sound like anywhere near enough for the task that's facing the city. I just wondered what the concerns are there and what the mitigations are. And then final question is about, given that there's going to be pressure on these places with a huge amount of demand, and certainly there'll be more demand for more facilities, what we're going to do to improve the way that that's effectively rationed, how it's allocated, and in particular with where you've got a very wide range of people with different abilities of access to getting their kid into their preferred place. It's very much a theme of the education admission system.
Okay, and finally, Councillor Maroof.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just following on from what Councillor Crosthorne was talking about a little bit earlier on. So mine is very brief, Chair. I mean, High Green Development Trust have been providing wonderful facilities from this building. And I believe they're on a tenancy at will, because I was involved at the time with yourself, Joe. And I'm assuming from this now that they will now have a lease that will be given to them. That's one question. And I'm assuming that they may well be considered for a community asset transfer as well, which hopefully they can be looking forward to. And thirdly is, and do correct me if I'm actually wrong on this one, I might well be, but I did hear a figure of around about £10 million to be needed to be spent on that particular building. Maybe that was just for the provision of the special school, but if the building continues to be used and it hasn't had the expenditure, because it's been closed as High Green Secondary School for a number of years, and I know the community have done really well to keep it going, would there be any allocation to support the High Green Development Trust? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so range of questions. Let's come back, but I think rather than focus on the future of that one individual building and organisation, there will inevitably now need to be lots of conversations about that, and I'm sure they will take place, whether it's a Community Parks and Leisure Committee or elsewhere. But let's just want to remind people that this is about the recommendations that are set out today. But Joe, Matthew.
Yes, thank you. Lots of questions there. Absolutely acknowledge the trustees and local councillors in High Green. And I'm sure that the process for the community asset transfer strategy policy will be followed appropriately for that. But I can't speak to any more detail on that. because it is a community building issue rather than an education, children and families one. In terms of the alignment with strategy and the quality angle and the experience of children and young people, we've developed, we've done a huge amount of work over the last several years, working with partners across the city, including multi-academy trusts, including teachers, parents, carers, children themselves. Let's not forget their voice in all of this. And with our partner Learn Sheffield as well, bringing their expertise to this space. And we have developed the SEND Manifesto and the SEND Strategy, which went through Education, Children and Families Committee. And I realise that probably this members of this committee won't necessarily be cited on the huge amount of work that we've been doing on that, and which we will continue to do. And obviously the announcements made today, as they become clear to us in terms of the detail, will feed into, and we're very confident will be really well aligned with the direction of travel that we're already on with our partners in the city. The question about capital, yes, we know it's not a huge amount of money, and we will need to spend it wisely, and that will be part of how we assess the potential for various sites, for work with existing schools on their existing places, sites, the use of buildings, etc. So it is going to be a creative challenge, but it's one that we will do in collaboration with schools themselves, rather than doing two. So I think it's quite an exciting opportunity for us to invest that money in capital changes that enable us to work better and meet the needs of children and young people better. And in terms of pressure on those places, you know, we are constantly assessing and forecasting pressure. And, you know, again, in relation to announcements today, it's too early for me to comment on any of the detail of that. But obviously we will continue to work in terms of our admissions policy and the application of that to ensure that we are, you know, being fair and even and supporting parents and families and carers. I think that's probably quick flash around the questions. Is there anything you wanted to add, Matt?
I think the only 2 points I would add in terms of the allocation of funding and utilising that, it comes back to the robust feasibilities. So we need to be kind of upfront about that in terms of as projects come through, how we manage that process. And just in terms of the development of this paper, the conversations that we've had with the sector across both maintained and trust schools have been really positive. There is a desire out there to do things differently. So we need to capitalise on that.
Jones, briefly.
Yeah, I think I just need to reiterate the fact that this also, while we have to consider the children and families and their outcomes, it does need to be data driven as well. We need to know where our children are, because the current system means that we build where there's space rather than looking at where our children are living, so that we can provide the provision where they are rather than expecting them to move around the city. So I think that's one of the key things for this for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So, page 695 are 3 recommendations that SNR is recommended to approve the decision to accept 10.34 million of additional high needs capital and not proceed with the previously planned special and alternative provision free schools. 2, separate to this decision, note the continued development of the new 80-place social, emotional, mental health special school with Wellspring Academy Trust for Sheffield. 3, note the risks highlighted with this decision and agree officers will take steps to mitigate and progress reported to Education, Children and Families Policy Committee. Are members happy to support those recommendations? Great, thank you very much indeed. So we are just up against the 2.5-hour mark, and I need your approval to extend the meeting by up to 30 minutes to finish the final agenda item. I'm assuming everyone would like me to do that, and I would just urge brevity on this final item so that people can get away in good time. So, item number 13 begins on an extraordinary page 715 in your agenda packs. And I will hand over to Tom and Keith. We've already heard from them both today, so I'll ask you to go straight into the report, if that's all right, please.
Yeah,
Of course, thank you, Chair, and I will be very brief with this. So the report itself is setting out a proposed citywide campaign, really focused on strengthening belonging, reinforcing Sheffield's identity as a welcoming, inclusive and compassionate city. It's drawing on a number of commitments, so obviously within our community strategy, but also with an amount of engagement we've been doing with community leaders across the city, mainly since last summer, and the disorder that took place in the city related to some issues then. And also the learning from our Community Cohesion and Resilience programme that we delivered towards the end of last year and that we've had independently reviewed. It was responding to a resolution of full council from the 5th of November 2025. It's really seeking to celebrate those different communities that make Sheffield such an amazing place. It's trying to unite existing events and activities that bring people together across communities under a unified message in terms of one Sheffield and many communities. Our intention is to use that as the starting point for a conversation with community leaders and really quickly to move into starting to use that to brand up and support a whole range of different events across communities of Sheffield and hopefully celebrate the diversity of the city. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Tom, Keith, thanks very much for your work over the last few months to bring this together. I think that message of one Sheffield, many communities is absolutely right for our particular time. We are a city of many faiths, many communities, many backgrounds, but we are one Sheffield, a city that we all love, and our diversity is our strength. And it's absolutely right that we come together to celebrate it. And what's set out in the paper gives us a framework to be able to do that, gives us the sense of a common sort of branding that we can then use with our partners to be able to deliver events that do celebrate that, and that we make it very, very clear that we are one city, many communities. Are there any people who would like to come in to speak to this paper? Councillor Maroof, and then followed by Councillor Belbin and Dale.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's excellent what we do, and I think long may it continue. It's fantastic, the work we do with various different communities, and I think it's hugely recognised by the communities as well. And they feel very included in everything. I mean, the number of iftar parties they're going to be in the next few days is just a testimony to that. So that's absolutely brilliant. There's only one area that I'd just like to bring to your attention, and that's around our rural communities and celebrating our rural communities as well. Maybe there needs to be a little bit more outreach work towards them. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dale, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if this is an iterative list where we can add on. I know we've got in here Men's Health Week in June, but it is International Men's Day on 19th of November, and that's not on the list. So I'm just wondering if we can add to that. Thank you.
Councillor Belwyn.
Thank you. I think this is needed more than ever on the day where Reform UK have announced that they want to set up ICE-style deportation agencies. I'm really pleased that we're taking forward something that is far more positive around how we work and welcome people to Sheffield and work with our communities to celebrate our diversity. My main point was really just, can we be as quick as possible, please? Because as Councillor Maroof has just said, we've got lots of these events coming up now, and I know the intention is not just that these are not just council-led events, but that it's community-led events as well. So I don't think this is an exhaustive list by any means, the list that's in the paper. But the sooner the better, I think, so that we are getting this message out. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tom, Keith, any reflections?
Really, really briefly, it's absolutely not an exhaustive list. It was a kind of a list of examples and things that are already taking place. It hasn't got the major events that take place across the city on that list at all. So there's a whole range of other stuff as well. It's an intention we can add to that as we go. And certainly I wouldn't, underestimate our, kind of outlying communities, rural communities. This is a piece of work that is about including all of the communities of Sheffield intentionally. So, really happy to look at something a bit more widely and see if we can do something in the rural communities as well.
Thank you very much. And linking right back to the city goals work, that work through the Sheffield Stronger Together team have identified 147 different neighbourhoods in the city, from rural parts of the Peak District within the city's boundaries right through to communities here in the city centre. The city belongs to all of us, and the idea is to hand over the brand to make sure that people can then use this in however which way they want to celebrate their community, our many communities, and our city. So I'm hearing positive support for the recommendations. Just for clarity, they're on page 717, that S&R is recommended to improve the campaign concept, one, Sheffield many communities, as a positive citywide narrative, and two, the committee is asked to approve the development and delivery of this campaign, noting the upcoming 20-year anniversary of Sheffield becoming the UK's first city of sanctuary in 2007. Are members happy to back those recommendations? Yes. Great, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our agenda today. We've covered a huge amount. Hopefully this gives people enough time to be able to get home in good time. Thank you all very much.